if I had chosen to go back to the hospital and this had happened, it would have been a completely different birth because they would have put me on Pitocin and I would have had her hours earlier, but it would have been an augmented birth and it wouldn't have been natural. Like, obviously, my body needed a stall for 12 hours or 8 hours or whatever to like really rest and relax to get things going so I could pop her out fast. I mean, if I'd been at the hospital, who knows what would have happened. And I'm really glad I didn't have that being shoved down my throat, like, ever. Or even because the midwives were just like, oh yeah, she's just up high. She'll come down in a couple hours. Call us when you're ready. And they just left. Like, they're not hovering. They don't care. They know it's going to take care of itself. And they're like, okay, bye. And that was wonderful. Like, so wonderful to not have them like hovering with nothing happening.
Getting pregnant and giving birth are two of the most exciting things you can ever hope to experience in this life. The moment you think you could be pregnant, you're frantically searching for all the best information, which is why you're here today. I'm Stephanie King, and with my many years of experience as a professional childbirth educator, doula, and lover of all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, I'm here to make preparing for your birth enjoyable, empowering, and totally easy. Each week, I'll cover different topics, interview professionals, and get into the nitty-gritty birth stories from mamas just like you. And when you're ready for more, you can join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I take you step by step through exactly how to prepare your mind, body, spirit, and partner for a birth you love. So let's get started.
This week's reviewer of the week is Maria Martins Thiessen. I hope I said that correct. And she said, love this podcast. I have a little obsession with birth stories and all things birth. Welcome to the club, by the way. I started binge listening to your podcast a couple months ago and absolutely love every single one of them. Awesome. I'm so excited you're here. Currently not pregnant or have any kids, but praying the Lord will bless us with kids soon. Can't wait to experience that and learn all the things. I've already learned so much from you. Thank you. I am definitely sending some prayers and love your way that the Lord will bless you with some kids soon as well. And I love that you're here before you're even pregnant because that is so fun. And I love that you love birth stories because today we get to hear another one. And the funny thing about this birth story is it is her second time on the podcast. She is an MAB mom, My Essential Birth mom. It is her third baby. She has already shared her birth story with us on the podcast, but it still has not aired. Like, we get so many requests and we get to record all these podcasts. And so her first birth story has not aired while we are recording her next birth story, which I just think is so fun. But with that, Maren, hi, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me back again.
yeah, you have great stories, so why not? With that, like, do you want to, why don't you, since we have the other one, but people are not listening to these in succession, why don't you share a little bit about you and your family, and then we'll kind of dive into this pregnancy.
Yeah, of course. Like I said, my name is Maren. I live in the Boise, Idaho area, kind of farther rural, I can't say that, rural. I live in farmland. Like Stephanie mentioned, this is my second time on the podcast talking about my third birth. I have 3 daughters. I love to read personally. Our whole family loves being outside at any opportunity, walking, biking, camping, the whole 9 yards. Anything outdoors, we'll do it. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I love it. Okay, let's hear about this pregnancy because if you guys are listening, I will put in the show notes the other episode where we have Maren talking about her last baby. But for this one, tell me a little bit about this pregnancy. Was it different than the last 2? And if so, how? Did you have anything that was like funky or weird? Was it pretty easy going? Like, what was it like for you?
Yeah. So this one was definitely different. Not in like the pregnancy itself, but just circumstances. As I mentioned, like, when we were recording the last interview, I was actually pregnant with my third baby. My second and my third are Irish twins. Their birthdays are 4 days shy of a year apart. I found out I was pregnant with my third when I was 3 months postpartum with my second. And so it was really shocking. It wasn't exactly what we had planned, but you just kind of go with what God throws at you. I found out pretty quickly, even though I was 3 months postpartum, I've always had really normal periods. And so I thought I could just be like, track it, do the natural planning, I think is what they call it. And I didn't realize that I didn't remember, I guess, from my first, that your cycle's not super normal right after you give birth. And so that's how we landed into this, our whole situation with our third. Because of the circumstances, like a lot of what was difficult about this pregnancy was a lot of like the mental side of things and the emotional side of things. Like I said, it's not like we didn't want more kids, but we didn't want them a year apart. We were thinking we were going to take a longer gap. And so we I had a lot of like processing to do with like, okay, this is our life now. We're going to have really young kids all at the same time. And of course, when you introduce the third kid, you've got all the hassles of it. Like you have to think about car seats and cars. Like we had to buy a new car because we had a third kid. And so like there's just a lot of the like logistical stuff. Luckily, the pregnancy itself was relatively normal up until like later. I had a lot of like pelvic floor issues, I think, or not a lot, but I had some pelvic floor issues. My hypothesis being that I didn't really have enough time to recover between the second and the third pregnancy. And so everything was just already loose and stretched out. And yeah.
Probably an
so
accurate,
that was fun.
Yeah, an accurate thought there. I think it's just the lack of like healing time and all the like pressure and everything down there. Like it totally makes sense that things could be a little trickier for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's
and my midwife would even say that. She's like, yeah, your pelvic floor is probably a little bit, off.
Right.
It's like things.
Totally true. How about, so for you guys who are listening, just to like recap shortly, Maren, your first birth was in a hospital, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so that didn't go exactly as you had hoped. And so your second birth was at a birth center. Where was this one?
So this was actually a home birth. I decided to do well-rounded and hit all the experiences. But it was with the same midwives who I had my birth center birth with. They had a home birth option. And so I originally went into the pregnancy. Well, I should say it took me a long time to like work up the courage to be okay with the birth center again. The pain from childbirth number 2 was very fresh. And I was really like, man, an epidural sounds great because I don't want to experience that again. I remembered it very well. But I ultimately decided to go back with the out of hospital thing or out of hospital option because I just, you get listened to so much better with midwives than with OBs, at least in my experience.
Yeah.
And I already knew the midwives I'd be going back to, as well as like postpartum recovery is just so much better when you're not in a hospital. Like, in my personal experience, I would 100% not go back to the hospital just to avoid the postpartum stay. So that's why I chose to go back to the midwives. And then I opted to go with the home birth option primarily because I didn't want to labor in the car again. That was like the big deciding factor for me. I think I was in transition when I was on the car ride to the birth center with number 2, and it's like a 30-minute drive. And so it was not pleasant. And I really did not want to repeat that experience. So I decided to do a home birth this time.
I love that. I love that you kind of share the thought process behind that because there are some of us, myself included, where you just kind of inch forward a little bit till you end up at home because of some of the things that you mentioned. Where you're like, you know what? Actually, like I've done this before, and the convenience and comfort, and I just put me in my house. Okay, I feel pretty good about that. So I like that. Was there, working with this midwife, was there anything that came up during this pregnancy? Were there any talks of induction? I would love to hear how many weeks you were pregnant at the end here. Did you have anything weird like broken bag of waters beforehand, prodromal labor, GBS positive, gestational diabetes, anything like that?
Yeah. So I was super lucky. I've always been lucky with my pregnancies to not have really any complications. I have a history of diabetes in my family, both gestational and like type 1 diabetes. So I was I'm always worried about that, but I didn't have gestational diabetes. I wasn't GBS positive either. By the end, so I gave birth at 40+1. So I was just over my due date. But that's the longest I was ever pregnant with any of my babies. I never made it to my due date before. And so the closer I got to that due date, the more discouraged I got. And I remember like at my appointment on my due date, I was like, look, if I hit 42 weeks, I will get risked out. Can you tell me what that process looks like? And my midwives were like, you're not going to make it to 42 weeks. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So they wouldn't even like talk about a possible induction with me, even if I asked for it. And so that was kind of nice. They're like,
Yeah, that has
don't
to
worry
be
about it.
comforting to be, no, that's not a thing. Like, did that help you put it out of your mind a little bit?
I went into this whole, like, again, I got really discouraged by the end. So the whole time I was thinking, on or before, I think I was going to hit like 42 weeks, like on April 11th or something. So I kept saying, on or before April 11th, I will have this baby. And so I had that April 11th date stuck in my head. And so I kept on wanting to be like, look, can you tell me if this is going to happen? And they're like, no. And I was like, okay, well, it was kind of frustrating, honestly,
Oh,
because I'm a planner. And I was like, let me just plan for this. But they
right.
wouldn't let me.
Oh, that's awesome. And so hard. I totally get it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good hard. I'd rather have them being like, let's not talk about induction instead of them being like, come on, you've hit your due date. Let's send you to the hospital. You know, like I'd much rather have it the way it went.
Good. Let's talk about your birth partner. How was he this go around? Is like, what was different? What was the same? What was awesome?
Oh, a lot of it was the same. I mean, we're all just really, so this pregnancy in particular, it was just, again, circumstances were hard because we had a 2-year-old, and then like when we found out we were pregnant, she was 3 months old. So we were just like really busy with our lives through this whole thing. But he was like really gung ho about all the decisions I made. He was a little bit skeptical about the home birth thing. He was like, do you really want to deal with like the idea, like every time you walk past that spot, you're going to be like, that's where I gave birth to my child. It's like, do you really want to live with that in your head? I was like, yeah, I'm okay with it. So he was a little skeptical, but he's awesome in that he's like, you know what? It's your body, your baby. I mean, his baby too, but he's like, you're the one doing the work. I will support you no matter what you want. So he got on board with it. And I think he liked it too, because part of like the home birth thing is that you kind of have to like prep your home in certain ways. And so he liked having actual things he could do when I was in early labor to like distract him, I think. So he ended up like liking it that way.
That's awesome. How about preparation? So, third baby, and you've done this twice before, but I want you to tell moms what kind of prep work you did. And if you felt there was, as you went on into this third pregnancy, if it ended up being more mental, more physical, but like, if you can, tell me what your day-to-day looked like and anything that you did, like even in distance time, like we did this every day, but like every week or every couple weeks, we made sure to do these things too.
So prep. I'll start with the physical prep. I really struggled to just eat in general. And so for me, like the big physical prep was making sure I was eating enough and then drinking enough water. So that was like my huge thing that I really focused on. When I was 28 weeks, I made a goal to walk 8,000 daily steps just to get like some more exercise into my life. And that lasted up until 34 weeks. I kind of got some pretty intense pelvic girdle pain at the end, and I just couldn't walk anymore. And I was bad, and I didn't really do the 3 exercises. I couldn't. I had too many other kids. Every time I tried to sit on the floor to do any kind of stretching, they'd like climb on me. And I was like, I just can't do it. A lot of my prep turned into like mental prep. I spent a lot of time just thinking about birth and like envisioning what I wanted. I spent a lot of time talking over what specifically I wanted with my husband, like what fears I had, what I wanted to do about them, talking through what I was worried would happen. And so what I could do to like make sure it didn't happen. And then like for about the last month before I gave birth, we had like rounds of illness going through my house, just kind of perpetually. Someone was always sick. So I spent a lot of time like cuddling with sick kids, my other sick kids, especially like at night. And so I would like just when I was awake at night, I would meditate or I would pray. I spent a lot of time praying, just trying to find a little bit of peace and comfort in like the chaos, because, dealing with sick kids is not fun. Dealing with sick kids when you're pregnant is like really terrible. And I just spent a lot of time praying for strength, especially like, I don't know how I'm going to do this when I've got another kid on top of it. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. Just help me, please. So a lot of like the mental prep work was towards the end, a lot of meditating, a lot of prayer, and a lot of just envisioning and that visualization, what I wanted it to look like.
I like that. That visualization is so important. And I feel like we get much better at it as time goes on when we've done it a couple of times, kind of like you're saying, that mental prep work. Mm-hmm. That is what I found personally for my, like the more babies I had, the more mental prep work I had to do. That's very real. All right, let's dive into it. Let's hear about the birth. Mm-hmm. So tell me about that first contraction. Did you say you had prodromal labor, or like, did things just get off and running?
Okay. I always have prodromal labor with my kids. It's just kind of a fact of life, unfortunately. I really hate it, but it just happens for me. So I had probably 2 or 3 bouts of prodromal labor that were like really strong, that I was like, this is it. I'm going to go into labor. And then they fizzled and nothing happened. I probably had about 1 a week for the first 3 weeks. And then I was, of course, having those Braxton Hicks that you have towards the end that get pretty strong and intense. So like on my due date, I went into my appointment and I was like, okay, I'm mad because I've never made it to my due date before. And I was really hoping I wouldn't make it to my due date this time. And my midwives were kind of like, okay, yeah, but you're pregnant. This is like goes with the ballpark, you know? So I was like, they offered me to do a membrane sweep, and I never thought I'd want one, but also I'd been pregnant it felt like I'd been pregnant for 2 years pretty much at this point. So I was like, yes, do a membrane sweep, anything to get me going. And I was 3 centimeters dilated and 70% effaced, I think is what she said. But the baby was sitting super high up, she said. And like the bag of waters was really like bulging. So she was like, anytime, it's going to pop anytime. And I was like, yeah, whatever. The midwives just tell you things to kind of help you feel better, I feel like. That was one of those things I felt was just like oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it. You know, anything to help me feel good. And during that appointment, I was talking to my midwives about like when to call. Cause, and my midwife was like, if you have any kind of contractions that are like consistent for more than an hour, call, because third babies are like, they can go super fast, they can go super slow, but we want to be on the safe side with this one. I was like, okay. I have like that guilty conscience about like, oh no, it was a false alarm and they came out for no reason. Like, oh, I made people get out of bed early. So I was like, really didn't want to do that. And my midwife was like, no, do that. She kind of was like, do that. Yeah. Anyway, so I had that appointment in the morning. I went about the rest of my day with like those kind of normal Braxton Hicks, but they definitely were like getting intense. And like towards the evening, I started noticing them like in my back rather than in just my stomach. And so I was up in the early or the late evening, like 10 o'clock with my baby because she was sick. And I was like, I noticed I was struggling to like stay still through the contractions. Like I couldn't cuddle with her very consistently because I just had like, I couldn't sit still. So once she got back down to sleep, I was able to go to bed for like 3-ish hours and like dozing. So then a couple hours later, I woke up because I had a bowel movement and I just couldn't fall back asleep. So I woke my husband up at about an hour after that. And after another 30 minutes, I was like, okay, I think this might be something real. So I called my midwives, and I had my mom come to this birth as well. So she came over at that time too. And so people started showing up. And like, this is where I said, like, my husband was happy we had a home birth, because while I'm sitting there kind of in this early-ish, active-ish labor, he's like filling up the birth tub and like prepping the table and getting out all the stuff that we wanted and like arranged the stuff that we couldn't do because we have kids, you know, and they get into everything. So he was happy to have like that hands-on stuff to do. And then like, I was happy to have my mom there because she just wanted to sit there and talk with me. And I like talking when I'm stressed. So that helped a lot. So then like for those couple hours, once people showed up, like I was wandering the house, trying to labor a little bit. The contractions were like strong, but I wasn't like needing to vocalize to get through them. And they weren't super close together. And so it was kind of like, again, kind of active-ish, kind of early-ish. We didn't really know what was going on. But after a couple hours, it was like 6 a.m. And so I was like, I'm tired. I'm going to take a nap. I basically haven't slept tonight. So I laid down in bed and took a nap. And I think everybody took a nap. Like we found blankets for my midwives and they crashed on the couch and took naps. And after about an hour, we all got up. I ate some breakfast and like contractions were totally slowing down. They weren't as strong anymore. They weren't as close together anymore. And so like I ate that breakfast, the sun was coming up. And so I went on a little walk with my mom and they still were not super close together. I think we were timing them. And when I was walking, they would come closer, but they still weren't super intense. And I remember having having a conversation with my mom, like, I just feels like this false alarm and this is never going to happen. This is just prodromal labor. Nothing's going on. I was just so discouraged. And so I go back in and to the midwives at my house and they're like, look, your baby's sitting super high still. She hasn't dropped at all. She's not really engaging in your cervix and she probably won't for a while because the sun's come up and there's that whole melatonin works with oxytocin kind of thing. So you're basically labor overnight more than you do during the day. And they're like, so we're just going to go. We've got stuff to do. And they were slowing down like pretty quickly. So they were like, we don't think they're going to pick back up for a while. So we're just going to leave you guys here to do what you want to do. And we're going to leave. And so the midwives left all their stuff. And then left themselves. They wrapped me up in like, one of those baby wraps, like the ones that's like a million yards of fabric that you just kind of tie yourself in an intricate knot in. So I had one of those. And so they tied my belly, like holding it up against me to try to get her to fall into my cervix. And they're like, stay there for a couple hours. You can take it off after that, but call us when things pick up again. And they left. And I, again, was super discouraged because it felt like a false alarm. But my husband kept being like, look, they left their stuff. They're obviously planning on coming back pretty soon. Like, they don't expect this to be long. You don't have much longer to go around. I was like, okay, whatever. So then, like, I spent the whole day just kind of relaxing. My contractions were, I remember they were strong enough that I couldn't really talk through them. But when I wasn't having a contraction, I felt pretty fine. So like I watched TV, I took a nap, I showered, I talked to my best friend on the phone for a couple hours. At some point in the morning, my mom left as well. So it was just me and my husband. And we're kind of like feeling weird because we don't have our kids with us. Like my in-laws have our kids, but we're just kind of like waiting and playing this waiting game. And it felt like really discouraging. Like it felt really discouraging because we couldn't like do anything because I'm kind of in labor. Like I was in labor, but not very active labor. So I couldn't like go anywhere or do anything. I was just kind of stuck at home waiting. And that's like the worst. I'm not a good waiter. Like I'm terrible at it. And so this was, I think, God's way of making me practice. And so like contractions were, like I said, I couldn't talk through the contractions, but was talking easily between them. And they were coming anywhere from like 15 to 40 minutes apart. So there's quite a big break. Anyway, so the midwives left at like 8 a.m. About 4:30 p.m. So like 8 hours later, I noticed that the contractions were getting like really long. And I was having to like really vocalize through them, but the contractions themselves were like 2+ minutes long. So they were long contractions, but they were still like 20 minutes apart. And so around this time, we briefly had my kids while my in-laws traded with my parents who had, custody of the kids. And so I remember when I stood up to help get my kids' stuff ready to send them off with the other set of grandparents, like the contractions started getting closer together and they're still really strong. And then when we swatched, or when the other set of grandparents took my kids, my mom came back and she brought me dinner. So I was like, I'm going to eat laying down because that's the only time I have any kind of break from these contractions. So I laid back down, they spaced out. I was trying to eat and I was able to eat a little bit between the contractions. But after about 3 contractions, I was afraid I was going to start puking it back up. So I was like, I'm going to stop eating. And I had to I was laying on my bed on my side eating, and I'd have to roll over onto hands and knees to deal with the contractions. And at that point, my mom's doing counter pressure on my hips. And then I've got my husband doing the one where you just put pressure on your back, like on your tailbone. Is that also called counter pressure?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 2 sets of counter pressure. And so they were both doing that while I was trying to eat dinner between these contractions, right? So after like a couple minutes, I was like, I think we should probably call the midwives again. So we called the midwives. She's like, all right, I'll come back out. She comes back out. Um, when I knew she was getting closer, I stood up because I knew if I stood up that they'd start picking up again. And lo and behold, they started coming like really quick. Like definitely hit transition at some point in this because like went from having contractions like 20 minutes apart to contractions like 2 minutes apart, like
Wow.
really quickly. And so she shows up so I called her the midwife at 6:30. She showed up at like 7:15. And I knew that she wanted to do vitals when she got there. And so I saved getting into the tub till after she did the vitals because she could do them in the tub, but I just didn't want to like have that mess with my mind game when I got in the tub. And so she did the vitals and I was like, oh my gosh, I've still got hours left of labor because when I hit transition with my second, I still labored for like 2 other hours. My midwife was like, probably not. And I'm like, again, that's just what midwives say. What does she know, you know? And she's like, well, baby's definitely lower. Like she's definitely dropped. Like to find her heartbeat, she had to find it a lot lower. So she did the vitals. I got in the tub like 10 minutes later. And I remember being like, okay, this is doable. I can do this for another couple hours. And then like within 1 or 2 minutes, my water broke. And it was like an audible pop, even though it was underwater. And with my water breaking, my contractions changed from like just like vocalizing, like a low groan, to like a pushing contraction, like as it broke. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's weird. And then like I started pushing and I couldn't really stop pushing. And like 4 or 5 contractions later, and she was born. Like within 5 minutes of getting in the tub. It was crazy. I remember I got in the tub and when my water broke, I remember starting pushing. I remember when she hit my tailbone, like as she was going down. And with my second birth, I pushed for like 50 minutes with my second. And I remember her hitting that tailbone and getting stuck. Or it's the pubic bone, the tailbone? One of those. Anyway, she got stuck. Yeah. It was back.
Yeah, that's your
tailbone. Yeah, so with my second, she got stuck there for like 30 minutes. I was trying to get her to push past that pubic bone. So I remember with this one, she hit the pubic bone and I was like, oh yeah, this sucks. I hate this. And then she was past it. And I was like, wait, that was so quick. What just happened? And yeah, and then she just kind of like popped out. And I remember being like narrating it to everyone around me, being like, oh, she hit my pubic bone or my tailbone. Oh, she's past it. Oh, she's like crowning. I can feel her crowning. Oh, her head's out. Like it was so crazy how fast it went. Like I did not expect that at all.
So I mean, yeah, that's awesome. She was born. Especially because you had them close together. So then you're like benefits maybe that like your body just did this recently and like here, you know, we don't have to sit there for 30 minutes. I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And like the whole time I was pregnant, the pain I remembered the most from childbirth was the pushing with my second. I remember being like, oh man, that just sucked. An hour of pushing. Like, I don't ever want to do that again. So I was praying the whole time I was pregnant, like long early labor, short active labor. Like, let me just push them out in 1 or 2 pushes and I'll be good. And like, lo and behold, that's what happened. So even though like the waiting was super tough, like the 20 hours of early labor, like definitely had its benefits.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Had that nice short pushing stage, which is really what I wanted.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's so great. Will you take a moment and maybe talk about what your contractions felt like and if it felt any different than the time before? But you kind of mentioned it early on where you're like, I started having them like down low, like cramping, and then they started wrapping around to the back. Mm-hmm. So like, how did they increase in intensity or like, where did you feel them? And then I'd love to hear what you were doing to be able to work through them.
I definitely am one of those people that feel back labor like almost exclusively. So that's fun. So that's how I could tell the difference between like the Braxton Hicks and the real contractions was like, it would start in the front and then I'd wrap around to my back. And as they got more and more intense, it was like, I needed that pressure on my tailbone almost more than I needed it on my hips, just to help with that. But yeah, it just kind of for me, the contractions just felt like the super tight. And then like it started as the tightening and then got like the low pain and then the back pain. And then it just, as they got intense, the pain just got more intense, I guess. And then to work through them, I did a lot of leaning over things and swaying. During that like day where I had like nothing going on except these random contractions, I didn't have to like work through them very hard. If I did, once they got more intense, it was like vocalizing the low groaning to get through them. But yeah, most of the time it was just the leaning on things and swaying, and the counter pressure on my back was what I needed.
What were you doing in your head? Like we all talk about Laborland and stuff, but like what was the conversation you were having in your head, or what were you telling yourself over and over again? Maybe affirmations, or you said that you were praying a lot. What were you picturing? What were you envisioning? Like what was happening inside?
I spent some time singing, like I'd sing hymns in my head because I didn't have breath for singing out loud. So I would be singing like hymns in my head. I would also just be counting my breath, my breathing. So in my head, I was counting like I think I was going inhale 3, exhale 5 or 6 or something. Anyway, so I was counting my breathing. And in my head, I was like thinking like, keep your face relaxed, like your eyebrows and your nose and your cheeks and your shoulders. I was just trying to like count. I think the counting and the breathing, I was mostly focusing on that to keep me relaxed, like in my head. And then like as they got more intense, it was more just like I was listening to myself vocalize, which sounds really funny, but like by paying attention to how I was vocalizing, I was able to tell how well I was dealing with them. Because, you know, if you get high pitched, you're kind of letting them take over. So I was really focusing on the tone of the noises I was making. Like when I was in transition, I think. I don't know. I don't think I was really off in labor land that much.
I mean, it sounds like you were. Those are the things that like nobody else knew what was going on. You know what I mean? Like there's so much I think that happens internally. You're so focused. Like it's a different focus, and it's just what it is. What about the people that were there with you? Like what was the most helpful things that they were doing throughout your labor?
Yeah. So like I said, I had my mom there, and I had my mom there mostly to be there to talk to me. My husband, when he gets stressed, kind of clams up, and I needs people to talk to me. So my husband was there like physically helping me. So he'd be like rubbing my back or squeezing my hips or doing the counter pressure stuff. Or like when I got in the tub, I delivered like in a kneeling position, leaning on the edge of the tub. And so he was holding onto my hands. Like had the death grip on his hands. So he was doing like all the physical support with like he'd rub, like I said, rub my back or my face. And my mom was there talking to me. I don't remember what she said, honestly. I'm pretty sure she was just saying nice things. I gave her a list of my birth affirmations before she came. And I don't know if she said them or not. I don't remember. But she was there like talking to me, just kind of being the background noise. And I remember between contractions talking to her being like, oh yeah, this really sucks. And she's like, oh yeah, it does suck. I've been there before. It's not fun.
Validation. It's what everyone needs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How about, okay, now that you've done the like home birth and the birth center and the hospital, like what was the difference? And were you so happy that you chose to be at home? Were you kind of wishing you would have chosen birth center? What was that like for you?
I was so happy I was at home, especially because I kind of had these 2 bouts of labor. I was kind of in labor in the early morning and then in the evening. If I had gone to the birth center, I would have been sent home. And then I would have had to go back. But I think because she came so fast once I hit transition, like pretty much from the time I stood up to like once, because I knew the midwives were coming, to the time she was born was like 30 minutes. I'm not sure I would have made it back to the birth center. I might have had a car birth. Yeah. So I'm really happy that I chose to be at home. I didn't have to worry about making it in time. And then like if I had chosen to go back to the hospital and this had happened, it would have been a completely different birth because they would have put me on Pitocin and I would have had her hours earlier, but it would have been an augmented birth and it wouldn't have been natural. Like obviously my body needed a stall for 12 hours or 8 hours or whatever to like really rest and relax to get things going so I could pop her out fast. I mean, if I'd been at the hospital, who knows what would have happened. And I'm really glad I didn't have that being shoved down my throat, like ever. Or even because the midwives were just like, oh yeah, she's just up high. She'll come down in a couple hours. Call us when you're ready. And they just left. Like they're not hovering. They don't care. They know it's going to take care of itself. And they're like, okay, bye. And that was wonderful. Like so wonderful to not have them like hovering with nothing happening, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think what you said
And
is
so I was really glad.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say just,
I was,
you go ahead. I'll come back at the end.
I don't remember what I was going to say. So
oh, shoot. Sorry. No, I was going to say what you said is just so important for moms to hear. And in my opinion, and I mean, professional doula opinion, but also just like from noticing like what happens in these spaces, you could not be more right about what likely would have happened. Like it would have been a conversation about like what's going wrong, something's not happening right. In other words, like your body's not working properly and we have to do something about it. That's what happens in the hospital settings. And so you can't stall for 12 hours in a hospital with nobody bugging you. But when you are given that time at home and there's so much that can be happening in that space of quote unquote stall, like we call it a natural stall for a reason, because baby, for whatever reason, is like, hold up, you know, we've got to either I'm finding a new position here, or there's hormones that are happening, or breast milk needs to happen, right? Or there, I mean, you don't know. Maybe there's some mental work happening with mom. There's so much going on during that time that you can't see, that you can't measure in a way of like dilation or contraction. That when left alone, look at the beautiful work that happens, and then your body's ready to go and whatever. But yeah, in a hospital setting, you're right. Pitocin and the monitoring and the extravaginal exams and you having to worry about your body and being uncomfortable and probably an epidural at some point. And I mean, it's crazy how all of that kind of can cascade, or when left alone with midwives who trust the process, what that birth can look like. So I absolutely love that you shared that. Thank you.
Yeah, I did remember what I was going to say.
Well, let's hear it.
I was going to say that the other reason, and the main reason I chose the home birth over the birth center was like the postpartum was great too.
Yeah.
Like I got out of I gave birth in the tub. I got out of the tub. I sat on my bed and that was it. They did their stuff. I didn't need stitches or anything. I did have like retained membranes that they had to like go in and get. So that like really sucked, but it just happened on my bed. And then they like gathered their stuff and left. And I just laid in my bed all night long. And it was wonderful. Like I didn't have to move. I didn't have to drive home. I didn't have to sit in the stupid hospital beds that are like made of metal bars and are terrible. And I just was really like, that's one of the main reasons I chose the home birth, was so I could have the super easy postpartum. And it was great immediately. I mean, besides the retained membranes, that was not great. But like the home birth between like you said, the letting the natural stall progress on its own and like the postpartum, like 100% we'll do a home birth again if I ever choose to get pregnant again. Too fresh.
That's fair. I have to say that was probably my favorite part too of having a home birth, was the postpartum, where it's like, nope, I'm just going to hang out in my bed now. I don't have to pick or pack anything up. We don't have to go anywhere. And I mean, depending on the time of year, it can be cold or hot. You know, it was just like, I don't have to be out in bright lights. Like I can literally just like chill in my bed and relax. If you don't mind, can we talk about that placenta for a second? So I kind of want to hear, after you gave birth.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like how long it took you to deliver the placenta, what that was like, if they had to do any kind of like traction to help it come out, or I'm just curious about how that went for you.
Yeah, so I birthed the placenta like within 5 minutes. It came super fast. But I didn't have retained placenta. I had retained membranes from like my bag of waters. And so so after I had like waddled over to the bed, they just were kind of keeping track of like the bleeding, like, you know, they do. And she was like, you're bleeding a little bit more than we'd like. So they gave me a shot of Pitocin, and then they kept on, I guess, seeing little pieces of membrane come through with like the big blood clots. And so because I was still bleeding a lot, they were like, well, you probably have stuff that's stuck up high in your cervix. So then they just like got a pair of, like, I think it was just scissors that were wrapped in gauze, basically, and had to like go up and like swab at my cervix to get the membranes out. And were able to get them all out. So the bleeding like subsided pretty quickly after that. But yeah, it was not fun. I was still very sore, obviously, and like within an hour of giving birth.
Not fun.
But
I
yeah,
love
so
that
it
you
was
didn't
just
have any
like
stitches
like I said, the retained membranes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, it was great. I didn't need stitches or anything. Just the only hiccup was that retained membranes. Yeah, not grand.
Yeah.
Would not recommend.
Oh, well, that's awesome. What a neat story. You know that I love these episodes, and I love to leave moms with like your very best advice that you can give them. And I feel like after 3 babies, it's going to be good. So I want to hear if there's advice that you can give moms and for their partners, what would that be?
Yeah. So I think my advice this time would be like, just trust your body. Like, we are designed to give birth, and it's hard to trust your body, particularly in today's society where they push a lot of interventions and they push a lot of doctor knows best. And I mean, like we talked about, if I had been in a hospital setting with a doctor, like, it would have been such a different birth and not quite as wonderful as it was. And if I had even just been like with an OB and me like getting closer to my due date, I would have been like, yeah, induce me. I'm sick and tired of being pregnant. But because I let it happen naturally and I let it work its own way through its stall, like, I was able to let my body do what it was designed to do. And that happened to be a 5-minute pushing stage, which is what I really, really wanted. And then for like partners, I would say, don't be afraid to like make up for the areas that you lack in support if you know you lack in areas. Like I said, my husband, after it took us to the 3rd kid, but we realized that he does not do well talking at me when I am in labor. And so we went and found somebody who could talk at me while I'm in labor, and it doesn't diminish his role at all. It actually helps because he's not trying to stretch himself beyond what he is capable of doing. So like, find the village that you need to find to create the support network for the birthing mama. You know, especially if you know you lack in something, like, make up for what you lack with other people. And there's no shame in that. It takes a village. And there's a reason people say that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you. Thank you for your story again, and for your advice, your wisdom, and just for the fun that it's so neat to be able to see you now back again after your 3rd baby. So congratulations, and thanks for being here.
Yep. Thanks.
If you loved what you heard today, the very best way to support this podcast and help other moms to find it is to leave a quick review. I read one at the beginning of the episodes, and I would love for yours to be next. And if you're ready for even more pregnancy, birth, and postpartum goodness, come join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I will hold your hand and walk you through pregnancy and birth step by step so you're totally prepared for a birth you'll love. See you next week.